singer in rock and roll would have to be Romeo. His vocal cords are made of gold. He just looks a little too old.
You ever notice how there are some people... Okay. You notice how many people... Okay. You notice how the majority of people seem to stop exploring new music when they leave their teens, and then they grow angrier over time about how nothing on mainstream radio seems to sound as good as what they listened to when they were in high school. This is why every major American city seems to have that one radio station. You know the one I'm talking about. It's that rock station that plays the same 30 songs every single day, and they're all songs comprised of music that was released over a 10-year period. But there is that one exception. They always play that one newer band. What are they called? Ah, right. Dexy's Midnight Runners. It's also for this reason that people are willing to pay exuberant amounts of money to see old bands when they decide to reunite for that one last tour. That usually turns into 4 last tours. Well, history has proven that bands getting back together after decades of being apart is really only good for one thing. Fictional movies about fictional bands getting back together after decades apart. Such is the story of Still Crazy. Still Crazy follows the turbulent reunion of a pretend 1970s British band called Strange Fruit.
Strange
Fruit, lots of reviews.
The little bit of history we get about the band is definitely well seated in rock and roll history. Drug abuse.
They're from my Chinese herbalist. They won't get you high.
Yeah, well, we can try.
Dead band members.
Maybe if I was dead, I'd get some respect.
It would be a start.
And bruised egos.
Sign this, please.
Sure, man. Best wishes to who?
I need a signature for the pizzas.
Strange Fruit was a band broken apart during an ill-fated 1978 music festival where the guitar player was zonked on horse tranquilizers and lightning ended up striking the stage. 20 years later, the band's keyboardist Tony meets the son of that festival's organizer who tells him he's going to be putting on a 20-year anniversary festival and he would love to see the Fruits reunite for it. Now, asking a band to reunite for the anniversary of the concert where they broke up is kind of like asking George W. Bush to sing the national anthem at a New Orleans Saints game, but it does make for an interesting plot point. Like most getting back together type movies, most of the fun in the first act is getting to see the aging members of the band in their degraded state of livelihood. It's a fun way to poke fun at the characters and introduce them as people no longer detached from the realm of commoners. Tony, the keyboardist, has held on to the sex element of sex, drugs, and rock and roll by investing in condom concessions.
Bloody hell, things are slow.
We also see Les, the bass player, who has started a roofing business, and claims to prefer his new life.
Is it sticky or going down?
He represents the old anger of the group, the member who has a hard time letting go of the harsh vibes within the band's social dynamic. Bino Baggett is the Hobbit-named drummer who holds the torch as the erratic mental archive of the band's history.
Hollywood Bowl. Yeah, that was a great gig.
We never played the Hollywood Bowl.
Didn't we?
Yeah.
Well, that's one of my most vivid memories. It never happened.
And of course we have Ray, the lead vocalist of Strange Fruit. Specifically, he's the second lead vocalist of the band. The original lead vocalist, Keith, was dead before the first page of the script's timeline. This meant that he had to be conceived starting with someone writing the words dead lead singer Keith on a piece of paper and putting it on a shelf until the writers later came up with the idea for writing the movie. This would finally make the whole event make sense, which is a much more effective way of handling things fourth-dimensionally than how I just chose to explain it. Bill Nighy isn't the world's best-known actor, but everything he's in, he seems to really try his best, even when that seems impossible. The fact that Nighy seems nothing like someone who would be a rock star is exactly how he prevails at playing the fragile and isolated character that Ray is. Bill Nighy plays this aging rock star with a subtle hilarity that makes you both love to laugh at his follies.
Kick some ass. Oh, fuck!
But you also kind of want to give him a hug when the other kids pick on him.
Well, it's better than being a wanker.
Unfortunately, his life is micromanaged by his very loyal but somewhat, unreasonable wife.
Din jävla idiot, är det som helst jävla äckliga idioter istället för mig? Ditt äckliga kuk av mig! Så tack ska du åka hem till Sverige, då åker jag hem till Sverige, din idiot! Din jävla idiot!
The biggest golem in the gears of the group's triumphant return is learning that the original guitarist, Brian, is temporarily dead for the first 2 acts of the movie, which means that the original creative core of the group no longer exists. But this twist does allow the guys to delude themselves into feeling like there is some sort of divine melodic spirit watching over them. As the surviving members of Strange Fruit allow the news of Brian's death to sink in, they are met with a heavenly coincidence that tells them they must try to play together again.
That's Brian. Yes, Tequila Mockingbird.
Is that spooky or what?
It's a sign. A message from the gods of rock and roll.
Now, the biggest problem you run into with making a movie about a fictionalized band while using a soundtrack comprised of original songs is that the songs in the movie will tend to suck? Or at the very least, they'll seem out of place in context with the actors. But what Still Crazy has going for it is that the songs were written by real rock music veterans like Mick Jones of Foreigner, Chris Difford of Squeeze, Clive Langer, who's produced people like Elvis Costello and Morrissey, Marty Fredrickson, who's produced Aerosmith, Ozzy Osbourne, and Def Leppard. Plus, the movie was written by Dick Clement and Ian LaFreniere, who wrote The Commitments and Across the Universe. It's this rock and roll pedigree that I think lends itself to making the movie seem so believable, with such insight to the mentality and odd idiosyncrasies of musicians.
If it's true that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, then drummers are from Pluto.
Beyond that, it shows what happens when these eccentric egotists start to get old and bring their dirty mental footlockers with them on tour. It's the little things like your hairdryer dying before the show.
Oh, fuck.
Stages that are far too small for your dynamic stage presence. Most of the film is a dramedy focused on the characters and their struggle to overcome themselves, while the music, it kind of plays second fiddle. And as the story begins to turn a corner, Ray is awoken from a self-deprecating stupor by a drug abuse relapse, a trip into a frozen canal, and a vision of lost guitarist Brian.
I saw Brian.
What was he wearing?
I don't remember, but I saw him so clearly.
Ray interprets this vision of Brian as a message that the universe is in the band's corner. The very next show that the Fruits play is an explosion of spirit, which is when the music really takes off for its biggest moments in the movie and proves that it is a force to be reckoned with. Take the song All Over the World. This is the song being played when you see that everything has begun to click within Strange Fruit. This song is one of the most formulaic classic rock songs I've ever heard. It is constructed from the ground up as a way to rally the audience to feel the band's momentum. If you dissect the lyrics, something like half the lines sound like the hook of an individual song. All over the world, day is following night, slay the dragon, crossing the borders of innocence, breaking down the walls of time, and on and on. It's one of those songs that sounds great theoretically as a rock song, but it doesn't actually have to mean anything. And who the hell cares? It's almost cheesy, but it's incredibly effective at using its borderline cliché-ity to feed this moment when you really want things to start happening for these guys. It's the musical equivalent to someone on a horse getting a mass of soldiers ready for battle. It's a little overdone, but it completely works as a way to make you start to love not only the band's music, but the band's presence. If you're not invested in the characters at this point in the movie, you might as well turn it off. You know, I wrote that joke and it still hurt my feelings. This movie's two-thirds interlude involves Ray leaving the band after seeing an interview held without him when the band was still struggling.
Slightly strange fruit.
Or how's about fairly ordinary fruit?
And in the wake of the Fruits breaking up, again, the band's manager discovers that the guitar player, Brian, is alive. Like I said, temporary death. He was dead to the audience at the beginning, and if you never finish watching the movie, he will never again be alive. Brian is the glue that brings Strange Fruit back together for the festival. But being the Syd Barrett-Brian Wilson hybrid that he is, he can't bring himself to go on stage. With the momentum of Brian's return swept out from under the band's feet, they take the stage in front of thousands, only to begin to crumble once again. This brings us to the final big musical highlight of the movie, The Flame Still Burns. The song is mentioned throughout the movie as being the lost track of the Fruits' legacy. They haven't played it since a couple of years before the band originally broke up. It's a tribute to the band's first singer, and it's a source of animosity between Ray and Les because of Ray wanting to be all Captain Kirk about letting Les have any microphone time in concert. But Tony begins to play this song as a final effort to save the show. And for a lack of a better meme to borrow from, it's simply magic, my female canine acquaintance. Yes, this is a savagely cheddar-rich way to end the story, but once again, it's one of those cliches that just works sometimes. These guys are hitting that final home run of the movie. They're buying their own quick stop. They're falling into lava in order to kill the alien. They are prevailing. And Brian even shows up to bring that line of happily ever after around full circle. They are, if only for one last night, the very minstrels of the fleeting moments we call life. Sorry. Cheers. This was Still Crazy, a movie low on budget but high on talent. It's really an interesting example of how you can make fun of pop culture and still do it justice at the same time. I didn't focus much on the straight-out dramatic aspects of this movie, mostly because, well, this show is supposed to supposedly presuppose that it's a comedy series. But on the flip side of how great the humor and dialogue is in this movie, when it wants to be serious, it comes off almost flawlessly, and there's even a couple of scenes that might just tug at your heartstrings. And of course, the music really kicks ass, at least within the context of the film. Each song is used well to be representative of the scenes that it's used in. So if you're a music nerd like me, give this movie an audition on your TV sometime. Still Crazy is a movie that achieves a level of authenticity about the human spirit that a great rock and roll movie needs in order to succeed. And while it's impossible to take a movie about a fake rock band completely seriously, I would argue that this movie does a better job of capturing the emotion that we all feel when sharing melodic moments with the masses than the majority of movies out there that claim to tell the story of real musical figures. Think of it as a movie meant for music lovers, rather than a movie meant for lovers of music. And if you can do that, then you'll be able to understand things that aren't even meant to make sense. Sort of like saying this is Topher from Movie Misperception saying you may not like it, but that doesn't mean that I won't not too.